In this episode, we are pulling together the big ideas from the last two CySA plus domains so that incident response, reporting, and communication feel like one connected way of working instead of several separate chapters you are trying to keep balanced in your head at the same time. By the time learners reach this point, they often know many of the terms, but they still feel uncertain about how the pieces move together when an alert becomes an investigation becomes an incident, and an incident becomes something that leaders, operations teams, and technical responders all need to understand. That uncertainty is normal because Domain 3 and Domain 4 are really about movement. They are about how security teams react, how they stay organized, how they make decisions under pressure, and how they explain what is happening without creating confusion. If Domain 1 and Domain 2 taught you how to see the environment and understand weakness, these last two domains teach you how to respond when something matters and how to turn technical findings into action, accountability, and organizational clarity. One of the most important things to remember before the exam is that Domain 3 and Domain 4 are closely related, but they are not identical. Domain 3 is mainly concerned with what the team does when an event deserves attention, how that event is analyzed, what actions should follow, and how the organization regains control. Domain 4 is mainly concerned with how the team communicates what is happening, how findings are turned into reports and action plans, and how different audiences are given the right level of information so they can make reasonable decisions. A beginner can easily blur these together and start treating communication as something that happens only after the technical work is complete, but that is not how security really works. Communication is part of the response itself, because an incident that is not escalated properly, declared clearly, or explained in a useful way can create just as much trouble as an incident that was never identified in the first place. Keeping that distinction clear helps on the exam because some questions are asking what the team should do, while others are really asking what the team should say, report, or recommend. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A strong review of Domain 3 begins with the incident response lifecycle, because many exam questions are really testing whether you understand order and purpose rather than whether you can repeat definitions. A security team typically detects something unusual, analyzes it, contains it, removes the cause, restores operations, and then studies what happened so the same problem is less likely to return. The exact wording may vary from source to source, but the logic stays consistent. You are moving from uncertainty to understanding, from understanding to control, and from control to recovery and learning. This matters because one of the easiest ways to miss a question is to choose an action that belongs later in the process when the scenario is still at an earlier stage. If the evidence is still weak, immediate aggressive action may be premature. If the incident is already confirmed and damage is spreading, endless additional analysis may be too slow. Good exam thinking means always asking where the organization currently is in the response process and what kind of move makes sense at that exact moment. Triage and incident declaration are central ideas in this domain, because not every alert deserves the same level of concern and not every unusual event should immediately be treated as a full incident. A beginner sometimes imagines that good analysts respond to every signal with maximum urgency, but mature security work depends on prioritization. The team has to consider scope, severity, confidence, asset importance, possible business impact, and whether the observed behavior is more likely to be malicious, accidental, or harmless noise. This is where calm thinking matters. An alert may suggest suspicious activity without proving compromise, and a good analyst knows how to gather enough evidence to improve confidence without losing valuable time. Once the situation crosses the line into something that meaningfully threatens confidentiality, integrity, or availability, the question shifts from whether to respond toward how to respond and who needs to know. The exam often rewards candidates who can tell the difference between investigation, validation, and declaration, because those are distinct moments even when they happen close together. Containment is another topic that becomes much easier when you stop thinking of it as a dramatic single action and start thinking of it as a decision about controlling harm while preserving enough stability and evidence to continue the response responsibly. Some containment decisions are fast and temporary, such as isolating a system, restricting an account, or limiting network communication to prevent spread. Other containment decisions are more deliberate, because the organization has to consider operational impact, dependencies, and whether a rushed action could break something critical or erase valuable evidence. That balance between speed and judgment shows up often in CySA plus style questions. Containment is not the same as eradication, and that difference matters. Containment is about limiting damage and buying control. Eradication is about removing the cause of the problem, whether that cause is malicious code, a bad configuration, a compromised account, or an exposed weakness that allowed the issue to happen. Recovery then follows with its own logic, because bringing systems back too quickly without confidence can recreate the problem or deepen the damage. A good pre-exam review should also include evidence handling and basic forensic thinking, because many incident response questions are really about what you need to preserve, confirm, or reconstruct before the organization can act with confidence. You do not need to become an expert forensic specialist to answer these questions well, but you do need to respect the fact that incidents leave traces, and those traces help explain cause, scope, timing, and impact. Logs, system artifacts, account activity, network records, memory evidence, and process behavior can all help build the story of what actually happened. The exam often pushes you to think about whether an action will support or undermine that understanding. If you wipe away evidence too early, you may make later analysis much harder. If you fail to preserve useful data, you may weaken the organization's ability to explain the incident or defend its decisions later. Root cause analysis belongs here too, because fixing symptoms without understanding cause creates fragile security. Strong analysts want to know not only what happened, but why it was able to happen in the first place. Plans, playbooks, and role clarity also deserve serious attention before exam day, because response quality depends heavily on preparation that happened before the incident ever began. Many beginners imagine incident response as a test of improvisation, but real organizations rely on predefined expectations so people do not waste time deciding basic responsibilities during a crisis. A plan gives the organization structure, scope, and escalation logic. A playbook gives teams more detailed guidance for recurring types of incidents, helping them move with consistency when the general path is already known. Exercises matter because a plan that looks fine on paper may still fail when people try to use it under pressure. This is why walkthroughs, simulations, and tabletop discussions are valuable even when they feel less technical than live defensive work. They expose confusion about communication paths, ownership, technical dependencies, and decision rights. On the exam, questions about planning and preparation usually reward the answer that improves readiness, clarity, and coordination rather than the answer that assumes people will naturally know what to do once the incident starts. Business continuity, BC, and disaster recovery, DR, are also part of the larger Domain 3 picture because incident response is not only about stopping bad activity. It is also about helping the organization continue operating or recover quickly enough when disruption occurs. A security team may successfully identify an attack and still fail the organization if essential services remain down longer than necessary or if data and operational dependencies are not restored in a controlled way. This is why resilience thinking matters. You should be comfortable with the idea that organizations prepare for service interruption, system unavailability, loss of data access, and degraded operations long before a specific incident occurs. When questions involve recovery, the best answer often balances security with practicality. Restoring a system without confidence may be dangerous, but delaying recovery without a reason can also create harm. The exam likes to test whether you understand that continuity planning, backup strategy, prioritization of business functions, and coordination with operational leaders are all part of responsible response, especially when incidents move beyond isolated technical problems and begin affecting the larger mission of the organization. As your review shifts toward Domain 4, one of the first major checkpoints is understanding that reporting is not a paperwork exercise that happens after the real work is done. Reporting is how technical knowledge becomes useful to the broader organization. A vulnerability report, an incident summary, a remediation plan, or a lessons learned document all serve different purposes, but each one helps people understand what happened, what matters most, what should happen next, and who owns the next move. This domain also expects you to think about inhibitors to remediation because security teams rarely operate in a world where every control can be changed instantly without friction. Budget, staffing, maintenance windows, vendor constraints, operational risk, system compatibility, and competing priorities can all slow action. The right report does not ignore those realities. It names them clearly so leaders can make better decisions. That is a common exam theme. The strongest communication is not the one that sounds most technical. It is the one that translates findings into useful direction without losing the truth of the situation. Stakeholder communication is another area where beginners can improve quickly once they realize that the same facts may need to be expressed differently depending on who is listening and what decision that person needs to make. A technical responder may need detail about indicators, scope, sequence, and system behavior. A manager may need a summary of business impact, urgency, next steps, and likely resource needs. A senior leader may need a shorter explanation focused on service risk, organizational exposure, and decisions that require executive awareness or approval. None of these audiences is more important than the others in every situation. They simply need different versions of the same truth. The exam often rewards audience awareness. If a question asks what should be communicated in an escalation, what belongs in a management summary, or how to declare an incident responsibly, the correct answer usually fits the needs of the audience rather than dumping every available technical detail into one message. Effective communication is selective, timely, and matched to responsibility. Metrics and trend reporting also belong in Domain 4, but they only help when they support understanding instead of replacing it. A key performance indicator, KPI, may show how efficiently the team is working, while a key risk indicator, KRI, may point toward growing exposure or conditions that deserve attention before something worse happens. The important exam lesson is that numbers are meaningful only in context. A metric that goes up or down is not automatically good or bad until you understand what it measures, how it is used, and whether it connects to real organizational outcomes. Strong reports use metrics to show patterns, support decisions, or demonstrate whether controls and processes are improving over time. Weak reports throw numbers at people and hope the numbers create meaning by themselves. Before the exam, make sure you can distinguish between raw activity counts and truly useful indicators. More alerts do not always mean more danger, just as fewer reported issues do not always mean better security. Metrics should help people see performance, exposure, and change more clearly. Another major checkpoint in Domain 4 is learning how to communicate uncertainty honestly without sounding lost or careless. Security teams often speak before every fact is known, because waiting for perfect certainty can waste time and increase harm. That does not mean guessing wildly or overstating confidence. It means explaining what is known, what is still being validated, what the current level of concern is, and what actions are being recommended while the picture becomes clearer. This is one of the most professional communication habits you can build, and it matters on the exam because many questions involve incomplete information. A mature answer rarely sounds like total certainty unless the scenario genuinely supports it. Instead, good communication balances caution with usefulness. The team may confirm suspicious activity, identify affected systems, note that the full scope is still under investigation, and recommend immediate containment while analysis continues. That kind of language is honest, actionable, and credible. It helps organizations make decisions without pretending the investigation is further along than it really is. Post-incident reviews and continuous improvement tie the final parts of Domain 3 and Domain 4 together, because the organization should leave an incident with more than restored systems. It should also leave with better understanding, clearer responsibilities, and stronger defenses than it had before. Lessons learned work is not about holding a ceremonial meeting and congratulating everyone for surviving. It is about asking whether detection was timely enough, whether escalation paths worked, whether communication was clear, whether playbooks fit reality, whether controls failed, and whether any vulnerability or process weakness allowed the incident to become worse than it needed to be. A useful review identifies specific changes in people, process, technology, or training. It turns hindsight into improvement. The exam often favors answers that move beyond blame and toward better resilience. If a question asks what should happen after recovery, the best response usually involves documentation, analysis, improvement planning, and ownership rather than simply returning to normal and assuming the problem is over because the visible disruption has ended. As a final mental checklist before the exam, try to hear Domain 3 and Domain 4 questions as asking one of a few core things. The question may be asking where the organization is in the incident life cycle, what action logically belongs next, how response should balance speed with control, what evidence matters most, what a given audience needs to hear, or how findings should be translated into plans, trends, and decisions. Many wrong answers on these domains come from the same predictable mistakes. Candidates choose an action that belongs later in the process, confuse containment with eradication, report too much technical detail to the wrong audience, or select a dramatic response when the situation really calls for verification and measured escalation. Good exam performance comes from staying aware of sequence, audience, and purpose. Ask yourself whether the answer fits the timing of the incident, whether it helps the right people act, and whether it improves clarity instead of adding noise. That simple discipline will prevent a surprising number of avoidable errors. By the end of this review, the main idea to carry into the exam room is that Domain 3 and Domain 4 are really about disciplined movement from signal to response to understanding. Domain 3 teaches you how organizations detect, analyze, contain, eradicate, recover, and learn when something serious happens. Domain 4 teaches you how those findings are communicated, reported, measured, escalated, and turned into better decisions and better resilience. When you keep those domains connected, the exam starts feeling much more manageable because the questions stop looking like unrelated vocabulary checks and start looking like moments inside one larger workflow. A good analyst does not just notice a problem. A good analyst helps the organization respond in a controlled way, explain the problem accurately, and improve after the problem is over. If you go into the test listening for sequence, context, audience, and purpose, these final domains will feel much less like a last hurdle and much more like the natural end of the CySA Plus story.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.